Hello, everyone. I shared the text, but just to voice, we are waiting a little bit more for all the registered participants to join, and we will make sure to start on time to succeed with the session. Thank you so much for your patience. Okay, I think that it's time to start, and I would like to say good morning, good day, good afternoon to all our community. Hello to We Empower G7 community. Hello to our Women Empowerment Principle community. Hello to all our friends that decided to take 1 hour off from their program and join us today. In September, we launched Boost Yourself Learning Series. We decided to conduct a series of building personal boosters, and we started with building your confidence. We spoke about financial fundamentals. We also spoke about how to get a seat at the table, so a lot about inclusivity. And also we spoke about the rights and liberty in the workplace. So we are continuing the series of learning sessions, and today we have an exciting topic for all of us. It's very relevant because we are living it right now, right here, all around the globe. I am living this, you are living this, our parents are living this, our sisters and brothers. So it's around us, and it's something that we care passionately. How to collaborate, and how to collaborate efficiently, and how to collaborate so we can enjoy the collaboration, we can enjoy the work, and also how to do it in a remote setting, in a setting when we miss our colleagues, and in the settings when we miss our surrounding, the workplace, or maybe not, or maybe we have some advantages in doing so. So today we will find out how to work productively in collaboration with others, and how to get organized and motivated without colleagues being physically near us. We also will learn a series of tips and tricks to apply so we can have more efficient workplace where we are, at the home or back home several days per week. Uh, it depends. In different countries we have now different situation, but also how to apply these tips so we forget about challenges and enjoy the personal life and enjoy the professional life. So I know everyone is super excited to learn. So without further ado, I would like to move on and present our agenda for today. So we talked about what it will be today on the table. Then we will have the learning session. Then we will test how well did you learn all the tips and tricks. And then we will have some closing remarks. Maybe if we will have an opportunity, we will take some questions. If you feel that you want to add this question and it's very relevant to what we are talking about, please make sure to add it via Q&A session. So today we have with us our colleague, Personal development specialist who delivered the session is Douglas Miller. His facilitation and training work has taken him to more than 65 countries around the world. He is the author of 21 books, and luckily we have an opportunity to work with him for this series of boosters. So we are all in good hands. And Douglas, over to you. Tell us all about collaboration in the remote settings.
Great, thank you, Diana. Thank you for the introduction. Very warm welcome to everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to work with you. I'm talking to you from the UK, so it's afternoon here. I should say good morning if you're on one side of the world, good afternoon if you're near me, and good evening if you're on the other side of the world. And a very warm welcome to this webinar, which, as Diana has said, will last 40 to 45 minutes. And we'll cover, I'll go through the introductory part in a moment as to what we're going to cover, but it covers broadly, as you can see in the title, collaboration and remote working. Collaboration and remote working. And there are going to be several elements of emphasis within this short webinar. So I'm going to put them up on the screen now. I'm assuming everyone can see really well. So today, this afternoon, UK time, what are we going to cover? So we're going to start with, more generally, what are the challenges we find with remote working? And that refers not just to you as an individual, but of course, as Diana has said, in terms of how you work and collaborate with others. We're all in different circumstances, again, as Diana said, around the world. Many of us have been now living this life since March, but we shouldn't also forget that remote working was on its way anyway. And I'm going to share with you some data around how effective we are when we work remotely. I'm also going to share some data around the kinds of things that get in the way of us being productive when we work remotely. So we're going to look at a series of challenges. We're then going to look at you personally and how you get yourself organized. So before we start thinking about working with others, how do we get you organized, how I get myself organized? There's no one way of doing these things. There are lots of different ways of doing them, but we're going to try and focus in on one or two core methods, and in particular something called chunking, a particular method of working, a particular methodology. I'll also build in some things about your well-being, your mental and your physical health. That's not the focus of this webinar, but it's an opportunity, I think, to look at ourselves holistically, not just in terms of performance, but also in terms of well-being. We've got those two things going together. They can sit really well together if we get them right, And then thirdly, we're going to look at the issue of collaboration. This is a much used, but also I will say a much abused word in the context of working. It is not about team working. Collaboration can be part of team working, but we do tend to see these days that these two things are used together as though they are one and the same thing. Collaboration is a particular way of working that can benefit very small teams. But what we're finding, and what anecdotally the research is saying, is that actually it's something that is being lost potentially as we work more and more remotely. Now that applies before the pandemic, but of course it's now coming to a head as we have the pandemic and we are challenged to work from home in effective and efficient ways. So let's start by sharing. So those three things, I should say, are what we're going to cover in our 40-45 minutes today. And as Diana said, if we have a little bit of time at the end for questions, we'll take the opportunity to have a few of those too. It'd be great to hear from you. And of course, I'll be very happy to be in touch with any of you after and beyond this webinar today, if you'd like to speak a little bit more or ask some questions beyond the time we have. Okay, so let's share first of all some data with you. So let's ask ourselves about working remotely, and let's ask ourselves particularly about the subject of engagement. So this comes from a Gallup survey. I'm not going to tell you what year this survey was actually taken until I've just shared with you two quick bullets on engagement. So interestingly, this is very interesting for me, employees who work 100% remotely are the least engaged. 100% remotely are the least engaged. And you may, as you read that, you may agree or disagree with it. This is one survey, but if you agree with it, or at least get yourself, or at least imagine yourself in a position where you are working 100% or close to it remotely, imagine how you think and feel and what the barriers might be in terms of engagement with your job. Why is it that those who work 100% remotely are the least engaged? And then secondly, those who work remotely 60 to 80% of the time are the most engaged. So they're getting physical contact, they're also getting the opportunity to work remotely as well. And in those very words I'm using, we probably see some ideas, some notions, some clues around why that might be the case. The physical contact that we need as human beings, which at the moment is being lost. So what I didn't share with you was the date that survey was. Sorry, playing around with my slides there. The date that survey was taken, which was 2013. So that's 2013. Have things changed much? You know, we're 7 years on from that. So let's move on a little bit. Let's move on a little bit to a survey that was taken a few years later. And again, I'll give you the year in a moment, a few years later, which shows that remote working has, as we can all imagine, grown exponentially over the last decade. Secondly, there was a prediction that half of us would be working remotely at least once a week by 2020. Okay, by 2020. I'll tell you when that prediction was made in a moment. What we know from surveys that some of us love this kind of nomadic lifestyle, using our tools, using our gadgets, using our bits of kit, using our software, using methods like we're actually using to bring this webinar to you today. We also know that there are plenty of people who don't like it at all. At the other extreme, imagine that we've got a line here, our digital nomads sit at one end, the people who really, really hate that lifestyle sit at the other end and desperately want to be with people all the time. And of course, the vast majority of us sit somewhere on that line. And then when it comes to routine, some of the things we're going to share with you in a moment about how you work by yourself, how you work remotely, will be based on creating routines for yourselves. But some of us don't like routines. Some of us don't like those routines. Some will argue that it kills creativity. It's something that we're going to talk about in a moment. It stops us generating new ideas when we're just locked into our routines. And some of us are really severely ambivalent about the whole idea of remote working. But the fact is, of course, right now, we have no choice. And the other fact is, not just inspired by what's happened over the last 10 months, but also what was already going on before, increasingly we're going to find ourselves doing more of it. Now, I should say that this survey was taken in 2018, so just 2 years ago, So this is the anticipated growth at the top, 91% growth. The survey tells us that 91% growth over the last 10 years, and we can get a sense of what that might now be even over the next 2 or 3 years. How many of us are going to be going back to those old routines and ways of working before? Some of us will. Some of us are in jobs that actually demand that we work in that way, but some of us will have to learn very, very differently. We'll have to work, I should say, very, very differently. So I'm going to share with you a lovely quote from the musician Laurie Anderson, who I love this quote. For those who perhaps aren't the digital nomads, for those of us who love human interaction and human contact when we're physically present, Laurie Anderson, I guess, has a lesson for us, but also I think a mindset that if we can use technology in the way that we do when we have campfire side chats, we can carry on telling our stories, we can carry on sharing, we can carry on giving, but the mindset has to shift in terms of the way we use the technologies available to us. And of course, increasingly it is. If I look at, I have two daughters, 16 and 20, if I look at how they communicate, I'm trying to mirror them, to mimic them. I'm probably making a fool of myself as a 50-year-old, 54-year-old man while I'm doing it. But my two daughters have a very, very closely defined and honed way of communicating and sharing stories and ideas. Some of us don't like it. Some of us love it. But who's to say what's right and what's wrong? These are the realities. These are the realities. So let's come on to you. Let's come on to me. Let's look at the challenges we have when we work remotely. So I'm going to share a few challenges that we have as individuals. I'm then going to share a few challenges we have as groups. And that will lead us into when it comes to you about how you can organize yourself effectively when working remotely, and also how you work with others, how you collaborate in particular. So first of all, let's look at some of the challenges we have, and particularly around your schedule, just actually getting the things done that you need to get done. And superficially, at least for some of you who started to work remotely last March or April or wherever it was that your country went under some kind of lockdown. My country here in the UK, we've just gone under lockdown today. This is our first day of the second round. There's a kind of, particularly if you're used to being in the office, there is a novelty. There was a novelty factor. It's great to be at home. Gosh, I can relax. I've got my coffee. I've got my kitchen. I've got my facilities. I can put some music on maybe. But maybe you then start to find that the novelty wears off, and that maybe delivering the things that you're meant to be delivering can become compromised if you don't have some kind of system that works for you. Secondly, the sense of separateness that people report. They don't necessarily know what's going on. There has to be a very conscious effort to get yourself out there, to get information sometimes. Okay, we have online tools for collaboration and communication, of course we do, but that doesn't necessarily feed the need that many of us, many of us have to talk to each other. So it's the sense of understanding what's going on. If you'll excuse me, I'll take a sip of water. As you can tell, I've just got a frog in my throat. Okay, that's better. Thank you. Okay, so the sense of separateness, what's going on? And then thirdly, this idea of, am I doing the right thing? Is this what I'm meant to be doing? Have I had proper conversations about what I'm supposed to be doing? Is there a little bit of educated guesswork going on here about my purpose and the things I should be doing? Fourthly, the barrier of communication. We've got this gap. Did I understand what I was meant to be doing? Did I understand you? Look at me here. I'm trying to emphasize things like my body language as I communicate down the line to you. I'm trying to use those things that we naturally use when we are physically present to also communicate messages over the platform we're using today. But we lose some of that. We lose some of the nuance, some of the subtlety around physical communication. And in particular, we can lose meaning. We can lose meaning unless we really emphasize when we're communicating online what we really mean behind what we're saying. The words say one thing, the body says something else, the voice tone says something else again. Trying to get all those three things in sync when we're communicating down a line can be difficult. And then finally, your well-being. I didn't move for the last 4 hours, as I've said here. I've been sat in the chair. This happened to me 3 days ago. I realized that I've been sat in a chair for 4 hours. I'd had no water. I'd had no biology break. I hadn't actually physically moved. And I realized 4 hours, that's an amazing amount of time. It's also incredibly bad for me. And I'm sure some of you have experienced that as well. With no one to stop you, no one to talk to you, sometimes just roll along and along and along. And how good is that for you? Okay, that's regarding yourself. Let's look now at groups, at teams, and some of the challenges that have been reported. So this is really up to date, actually. I've been doing some research over the last week or so, knowing that this webinar was going to happen. I've been doing some research anecdotally what people are saying over the last few months. The loss of creative energy. People are reporting fewer new ideas, less innovation, less newness in the way we work. Secondly, they're reporting the loss of what we might call social capital. We talk about effectiveness in groups being first and foremost based on the trust that individuals have in that team, the trust between each other. There's lots of ways in which we trust each other when we're working. Our ability to be reliable, to deliver on time, and to deliver to a good and high standard is one aspect of this. The other is, of course, the relational aspect of trust. I know you. I know about you. I know what you think and feel. I even know about your family and a little bit about your life and so on. And that's how we build trust. And some of those things are lost or are harder to gain when we work remotely, and particularly when we're working remotely all the time, or nearly all the time, as many of us, I know not all, but many of us are. What we call the tunnel is the third one, where we have less channels, fewer channels, I should say, for communication. Fewer channels for communication. We've got these wonderful tools available to us now. Imagine it was 20, 25 years ago and we didn't have these things, but we had a pandemic. What would life have been like then? So we have these wonderful channels, but many of us still report, you know, I miss that. I miss the human interaction, you know, the primary tunnel of being physically, the primary route to communication, I should say, of being physically present with others. A lot of people are also reporting that they're finding themselves just becoming very, very functional and task-driven. The focus is on the schedule and very little else. Let's do the 5 things on our to-do list, done, 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 done. But actually, there's not a lot of forward thinking going on. As we've said in the first one of these that I'm putting up, first one of the challenges I'm putting up, there are fewer ideas. There's less innovation. There's potentially less collaboration, which we're going to talk about in a moment. And it's tougher to actually create what we call the shared space that needs to exist in order that people collaborate effectively. It's tougher to create that shared space. And again, I'm going to say a few things about that in about 10 or 15 minutes time. It's going to be the real focus for the last 15, 20 minutes of this webinar, how we create that critical shared space that allows us to collaborate effectively, which of course is easier to create when we're actually physically together. So this is about a shared psychological space as well as a shared physical space. Clearly, the physical space is not possible, so how do we create the shared psychological space around which collaboration can happen effectively? Okay, so we're going to take you now into you. We're just going to look at you for the moment, and me, and around how you find what we call your spark. Okay, your spark. How do you find your spark when you're working remotely? And those of you who are looking very closely will realize that, Doug, have you actually misspelt spark? It doesn't normally have a C on the end. There's a very conscious reason why that is the case. It is misspelled, but this is an acronym, and I'm going to put across 5 principles around which you can find your spark when working remotely. And we're going to pick out 1 or 2 of those, and in particular, the first one for more detailed assessment. So what are we talking about with the spark? Let's start with the first one, which is the S. This stands for self-direction. You are going to be more self-directed, or you're far more likely to be more self-directed when you work remotely or from home. Some of you love that. I love that. But I know that not all of you do. I know that not all of you do. It's easy to assume that actually this is a great thing for all of us. And more self-direction, that's exactly what I want. But actually, there's a lot of people who don't necessarily need that all the time. So when we talk about self-direction, we talk about method. We talk about finding a method, a routine that works for you, that defines the boundaries around which you are going to operate from home or remotely, wherever that might be. So what is your method? What is your routine? What do you do when you start work in the morning, whether that's 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, or whatever? What do you actually do when you start work? Do you have a planning process, a planning procedure where you map out your day, where you prioritize certain tasks, where you say, well, that's not so important, I can maybe do that tomorrow, this is critical, I've got to do it now? Or do you tend to work in a more randomized way? Or are you dictated to by the needs of the job role that you actually have? So your job role demands that you work in a particular way. You have to be very responsive, for example, to email, to calls, to customers. So you have to develop and build your routine around that. But if I ask you your question, what is your routine? What are your boundaries? Do you have one? Do you have one? And we're going to share with you in a moment one way of actually developing a method around which you can plan, prioritize, and organize yourself at the beginning of a working day. I'm hearing some really interesting stories about how people bring discipline into their home lives. I read the other day about a woman who actually has been working from home for 9 months, but she actually puts her work clothes on every morning as though she was going to work. Makeup, hair, clothes, ready for work as though she was going into an office, and then she does the 5-meter commute from bedroom to desk. But she needs that discipline to get herself going. I love the idea of that. I'm not quite sure I do it every day. I have got a nice work shirt on today, but I can't lie and tell you that I do that every day. Quite often it's a t-shirt. Okay, we're going to come back to self-direction in a moment. P is for purpose. Do I know why I am doing what I am doing? This is something that it's easy to lose. I mentioned that a minute ago. This is something that it's easy to lose. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And I'm going to give you 3 things here to think about, which we're then going to explore a little bit further in collaborative working. When you're thinking about purpose, think of these things. So when you work, there are 3 things you need to be thinking of. First of all, what specifically is the task that I am doing? And then second and thirdly, these kind of come together. What problems, this is the second one. So what task, can I define the task? That's the first one. The second one, what problem am I solving? Or what opportunity am I exploiting? And if you can't answer that question, if you can't answer based on the task you are doing, what problem, let me expand that a little bit, what problem am I identifying and solving? Or what opportunity am I identifying and exploiting? I'll ask you the question, why are you doing it? What is its purpose? If you're not solving a problem or you're not exploiting an opportunity, why are you doing it? And if you can't answer that question, start asking the same question to others. Why are we doing this? Thirdly, alignment. Being connected with others. This is something that's easier to, I think, hold in the workplace. It's easier for us to align. We can have those quick informal conversations around making sure that we are all in a line, we're all seeing things the same way, we're all heading in the same direction. We lose that informality, those informal networks that we have in the workplace that really, actually in many ways, even if you work in a very hierarchical organization, it's those informal networks that actually often help us to get things done. We don't necessarily need to communicate up and down in our organization in a very hierarchical, structured way. The most effective people are the people who can go like that. They are brilliant internal networkers. And the more powerful and strong your internal network is, the more you get a sense of what's going on, the more you can align yourself with what your team, your department, your organization is trying to do. So being aligned with others when you are working remotely, finding ways to do that. And if you're very tempted to answer that question, well, yes, I am, I'll ask you the question, how do you know? How do you know? I'm not pointing the finger and saying, how do you know? I'm just asking that question in a very relaxed sense. You know, how do you know? How do you know? Are you sure? Just ask yourself that question. Fourthly, we're humans. We like reward. Financial, yes. But those little things that really get us through our day, and when we lose them, we really, really notice them. Those little things that you can see there. Feedback, for example. We're going to talk a little bit. One of the last things we're going to do today is just a few suggestions. If you're managed by somebody else, how you can strengthen your relationship with your manager or your supervisor. But giving and receiving feedback, praise, acknowledgement, thanks. You know, thank you is one of the primary motivators in the workplace. It's free. Is it something that gets lost? It's something that you can do. Remember, some of you will know these words. Behavior breeds behavior. Remember how you feel when someone says, you know, that was great. I really appreciated what you did. I really liked the way you did this. You really helped me. When we hear those things, we feel good. And we can really help that process by starting to do that when we're working remotely. What you get, what you give, you get back. Behavior breeds behavior. So those little rewards, and you can develop some little rewards for yourself, when you're working from home. I do these things myself. If I've got a big chunk of work to do, I then treat myself to a walk at the end of it. I'm not going out. It's a beautiful sunny day now in the UK. When I finish this, I'm actually going to go out for half an hour. I'm going to take a walk. I'm going to enjoy the last of the afternoon sun. That's my little reward for the day. And I need those things, and I'm sure many of you do too. And then finally, C is for challenge, the C of the SPARC, not a K, the C. This is, you know, if we believe, and I know that you know, UN Women, ILO, EU, very committed to the idea of lifelong learning. What am I learning about myself as I go through this process? What am I learning about my relationships with others? What am I learning about different ways of working? So thinking about the learning process and how you're gaining and how you're benefiting as a person, even when you're feeling some sort of sense of loss as you go through this process, perhaps. Okay, so we're going to pick up on the S for self-direction. I'm going to share some data with you around distractions, okay, around distractions. So I'm going to click through these quite quickly. I'm not going to read every slide, every point that I'm making on this slide here, but just some things for you to think about. So when you get distracted, studies show it can take as long as 26 minutes, or sorry, an average of 26 minutes to then resume working on the task. And the reason is, one of the primary reasons is, we start doing other things. We get distracted, but then we start doing other things. So we don't actually return immediately. We get distracted again. These statistics do relate. Sorry, this statistic in particular does relate to when you are working in an office. So this is when some of this data was produced. But when working their computers, average person interrupted every 40 seconds. This one relates very much to remote working, with alerts and instant messaging activated every 35 seconds, unless you switch them off. Do you have, so just an example of this, you know, do you have the ping when your email, when an email comes in? Does your computer does your laptop or your desktop make that pinging noise? Is that then a distraction for you? Should you be switching it off? Switching between applications 566 times a day. And look at this, coming back to email, checking your email 11 times per hour, up to 88, assuming an 8-hour working day, 88 times per day. Do you have some discipline around checking messaging, alerts, and emails? What is your discipline? Again, in a moment, we're going to look at a few little techniques that can help you here. If you are one of those people like me who gets easily distracted. And here we have our final piece of information. 50% longer when we continually switch between tasks than when we focus on one task for a given period of time. So let's share some tips and ideas and hints around getting organised. So I'm going to share these with you fairly rapidly in bullet point form, and then we're going to go on to one particular method which we know as chunking. So first of all, if you don't have a system, a technique around getting organised, the S for self-direction, there are lots of them around. I won't go through all of them now. There are some I disagree with. There are some I agree with. I'm not going to present any particular personal biases now, but some of you have probably come across the Eisenhower technique, the Pomodoro technique, and the technique of chunking, which is one that we're going to drill down into in a moment. We need to reference, so we need to think about when we get ourselves organised, how many emails I typically receive in my inbox every day that I need to deal with. Some of you 10 or 20, some of you 50, some of you 100, some of you more than that. I meet people when I do live facilitation around topics like this who are receiving 200, 300, 400 per day, and they need a system to deal with it. I'll share a little system around that in a moment with you. Preparation for online meetings. So at the moment when we're working remotely, when we're planning our day, when we're getting ourselves organized, we also, as well as emails and the number of emails we receive, we need to think about what our meetings are, what preparation I need to do, the meetings that are routine, the meetings that are one-off. And I always say to individuals, to teams, to departments, to organizations, having a routine meeting, one that happens, say, every Tuesday at a particular time, doesn't mean that you actually always have to have it. There has to be a point. Sometimes I think we have these routine meetings because it's what we do, not because it's what we need at that particular moment. So attendance at online meetings, how long do these take? Half an hour, 40 minutes, 50 minutes, 1 hour? One thing I love to say, one thing I think that is so important right now, as so many of us around the world are working remotely, is that we really must devote time at the beginning of our meetings to social bonding, building our social capital, as I referred to it earlier. Now, if you're one of those people who likes to get straight down to business, it can be frustrating for you because you want to get to the point. But actually, it's really important that we allow those who actually really need this social interaction to talk outside of what we're doing at work. Yeah, how's your day going? What happened over the weekend? What are you up to? Just those kind of casual conversations that mean a lot to some people. We should allow time for that. Identifying when we plan our day, when we plan our week, the routine tasks, things that must be done. And I think this is such a critical one. So many of us are working on projects, we're working on things that take place over a long period of time. It's easy for those to get shunted back because of often non-important short-term delivery topics, short-term deliverables, I should say. Thinking time, so important. Einstein said that he would often spend half a day looking out of a window and just thinking. Now, I'm not standing here saying you should be doing that, but I will say that we need to consciously recognize that sometimes I need just to draw back breath, give myself time to think instead of just becoming this totally functional human being that's just moving from task to task. And always allowing time for emergencies and the unexpected. So here's a little tool then. This is chunking. This is one that I use. It won't be right for all of you. It does depend partly on the nature of the work you do. But it's an important one, I think. It's an important one, and I think one that will work for many of us. So I'm just going to go through this, and I would suggest to you that if it's something that appeals, I'm just giving you some headlines here, look into it further, because I find it a very valuable technique. First of all, manageable chunks, around 3 chunks per day, lasting between 60 and 90 minutes. I'll probably get wrapped over the hands by some experts in this subject because they will say 90 minutes is too long, it should be 60. Okay. But when you've done that 60 minutes or 90 minutes, you then take 5 to 10 minutes out. Make yourself a cup of coffee, put your head outside, do whatever you need to do, but don't just jump straight into something else. Just breathe. Coffee, fresh air, whatever it is. A chunk of time for responding to emails, however many you have in a day, and for making calls. Is that 15 minutes? Is that 20 minutes? Is that half an hour? I know many people who respond to their emails at the beginning of the day and about an hour before the end of the day, and they work on the basis that if anything is really important, phone me up, text me, message me. And those disciplines, I think, are really, really valuable, so that you don't live in your inbox. Identify what's urgent and what's important. Remembering that, to my mind, all truly urgent tasks, truly urgent, where the deadline cannot be shifted, are important. All truly urgent tasks are important. Moving on, think about your energy levels. When are you at your best? Is it 9 o'clock in the morning? Most of us seem to be at our best between about 9 and 11 o'clock in the morning if you're working a conventional working day. Studies show that the majority of us even are at our most physically and mentally vulnerable at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So is that a sensible time to be actually working on the tough stuff, the stuff that's really challenging to get through, that requires deep thought? Probably not. So think about what the best time to do those difficult things is, and not 3 o'clock in the afternoon if you're someone who struggles at that time. And so, building on the two previous points that I've made, you then look at your list of tasks you've got to do and factor in, place in a sequential order based on urgency and importance and your energy levels, and you'll begin to get an idea about when you can put certain tasks in certain slots during the day. It may be that you feel that you're responding to your emails doesn't require so much energy, doesn't need you to be up here. Therefore, when your energy levels are lowest, that's when you're actually going to choose to look at your emails. Once you've got your list together, commit to it, reminding you, as I said earlier, take a short break after each chunk and avoid multitasking on work that has been chunked. There's a lot of cliche. We know, some of us, I'm sure, have heard of some of the cliches around, are women better at multitasking than men? I make no comment on that. My view is that we can multitask effectively on things that don't require deep thought, perhaps routine tasks that don't require too much thinking. But on work that's been chunked that requires immersion, then we shouldn't even for a second be thinking about multitasking. We focus, we immerse in that thing. Now, all of these things sound incredibly obvious, perhaps to you, but we know that common sense around this kind of thing is not necessarily common practice. I would urge you, if you haven't thought about this, to go online and look up some of the methods, the Eisenhower principle, Pomodoro effect, chunking, and there are many others, and you'll come up with some different tools, and some of those, or at least one of them, will be right for you in the way you work. This is one that works for me. Okay, so as far as getting organized is concerned, I will also add, think about your mental health, think about your well-being, thinking about proper breaks in the morning, taking a proper lunch, not being tied to the desk for 4, 6, or 8 hours at a time. Get your body moving, because that's actually how you get your brain moving. You get your brain moving. Okay, you've got to think about your energy levels, and just taking without replenishing and replacing is not good for anybody. Okay, so moving on, I'm going to share some tips and hints and ideas very briefly now about working with your manager and supervisor. We've got about 15 minutes left. So key things: ensuring clarity around expectations. What does your manager and supervisor expect from you? Have that conversation. Make sure they know that you are being proactive. It's easy to get lost. Thirdly, accommodate schedules. Make sure your manager or supervisor knows that you have particular needs during the day and requirements. They may be around childcare, for example. Not everyone's day is the same. I'm here working from home. I've got no distractions at all. Other people have got, I was giving a webinar to Bangladesh the other week to a group of workers, and some of the people that I was talking to there are working in they've got 2 rooms in the house, they've got 4 children running around, and they're trying to work at the same time. So let's just be aware of each other's schedules and the way that we have to operate. How do we get this done? Constantly being aware that there are always alternatives. If we become too functional, we forget the alternatives that are available to us. I mentioned this fifth one earlier, establishing a routine for feedback. How do I know how I'm doing? Talk to your manager, talk to your supervisor, get a routine going where you get feedback once a week, once a fortnight, however, or in the moment, but make sure you get that feedback. And with interpersonal challenges, this I think is one one big issue around remote working, that sometimes interpersonal challenges don't get dealt with. And we should consciously be expressing how we feel when someone hasn't done something we expected, when someone's behavior was inappropriate. We should be able to say, when you did or said this, it made me feel this way. Just as we do when we're physically with somebody, we should feel comfortable that we can do this when we're working online too. Things don't change, but those conversations happen constructively. So let's move on. I'm going to ask you a question now. I'm moving quite quickly. We've just got a few minutes left. Look at the image on the screen. What do you see? What do you see here? So we haven't got an opportunity to interact with each other right at the moment, but I want you to ask that question. What am I seeing when I look at that picture? So let me give you some examples about what it is that I know that at least some of you are seeing. By the way, I should say to you, none of you are wrong in terms of what you are seeing here. There's no right answer. So you may be seeing the face of a bearded man. You may be seeing a map. You may be seeing Spain in the bottom left, moving off Europe, or a bit of Greece, the man's, if you can see a beard. You may see a pointy finger at the bottom. You may be seeing a spotty cow. You may be seeing ink spilt on a white piece of paper. None of those things are wrong. What's key is you are all seeing different things. You're all seeing different things. In this image here, we can see that it's actually the same image we had before, but represented in a slightly different way. We can see that there is the image of a kind of Che Guevara or Jesus Christ figure appearing in the image. The point here is, when you see this, it's really difficult to unsee whatever you are seeing, isn't it? Really difficult. Once you've got something fixed in your head, is it the bearded man? Is it Spain? Is it the pointy finger? Is it the spotty cow? Is it the ink on the paper? Whatever you are seeing, that image now dominates for you. And I know for certain that all of you out there are seeing different things. If I was able to, we'd probably get a list of 20 or 30 things that you're seeing, but which become hard to unsee once you've seen them. What we're seeing are our representations of reality, what we call our representations of reality. So today, to finish in the last few minutes, and I'm hoping I can just steal a little bit more time, just to finish up now with how we work together, bringing together our different representations of reality when we've got these boundaries already that exist between us, the fact that we cannot be physically present. So we are unable to collaborate perhaps in the way that we normally would, in the ways that we normally would. So over the last sort of 3 years or so, I've done a lot of work into collaboration. And one of the most impressive things I have come across is some work by someone called Michael Schrage on really defining what your glue is. What is the thing that keeps you together when you have these different representations of reality, all combining in an online environment? We need to develop what we call a shared psychological space, because we're not physically together. We need to develop a shared psychological space. So how do we do that? How do we create this shared psychological space? And Michael Schrage, whose name I mentioned a minute ago, defines it this way. I'll give you a chance to read that. Debate, create, manipulate, iterate, and capture and critique our representations of reality. And what he tells us is that technical performance is easy. Over time, we get used to the platform, and it happens quite easy for most of us, even though we're deeply sometimes resistant, and me perhaps more than almost anyone else, deeply resistant to these new platforms. We get used to them and we use them. The difficult bit is human performance. Technical performance is easy, it's straightforward, we pick it up. It's the human performance issue when we collaborate that's difficult. Creating that shared space when we're working online, and that's the reference, Shared Minds, Michael Schrage. So let me then click on with a number of tools that I find, a number of mindsets, I should say behaviors that are particularly important in collaboration. That'll take us to the finish. So what we're trying to do here, as a reminder, is to create shared space. We're creating shared space. And how does that process begin? It begins by exploring and be willing to explore other people's worlds. Now, earlier you heard me say that we should always be asking ourselves, when we're thinking about the work we do, what problems am I identifying and solving, and what opportunities am I identifying and exploiting? Collaboration is a brilliant way of doing that. We create the shared space around which we solve our problems, around which we exploit our opportunities using collaborative processes. It starts with exploring other people's worlds, and it starts with you being humble, being curious, and being adaptable. Being humble. I am not the center of the universe. The world does not revolve around me. I control my ego. And a good illustration of that is I am comfortable saying I don't know when I actually don't know. I am comfortable asking for help even when I'm working remotely. I don't understand, I don't know. So it starts with the self, controlling my ego, I'm not the center of the universe. Then being curious, seeking out perspectives that are different to my own, worldviews that are not the same as mine, but actually seeking those out, asking questions, using your online platforms to start sparking up conversations with other people. By the way, I strongly believe that collaboration does not really happen effectively if you have more than 4 people. Collaboration is extremely unlikely to happen when you have groups of 8, 9, 10, or 12, because we start conforming to a number of pre-accepted behaviors. We work to a lowest common team denominator, when actually when we collaborate, we need, in some senses, the opposite of that at times, okay? So keeping your numbers small when you're solving problems, when you're identifying and exploiting opportunities. You need to be curious about what others think and feel and believe. To keep listening when you hear perspectives that are different to your own. And then as a consequence of that curiosity, as a consequence of that humility, we then become, we should then in theory at least become more adaptable, because we start to understand that the world for others is not as I see it. And the way they see it may be actually better in some ways than the way I see it. The way I solve this problem may not be the best way of doing it. And then that demands of us that we become adaptable. We're willing to change the way we do something because we can see there is a better way to do it. And I'm really focusing on this in this webinar on collaboration, because to my mind, these are the things that get lost when we've got this barrier of very little physical connectivity between us. These are the things that potentially, I don't want to over exaggerate, but potentially get lost if we don't if we don't consciously make an effort. So being adaptable includes, here's a good kind of behavioral indicator, encouraging others to give feedback. I think that's the 3rd or 4th time I've mentioned this in this webinar, encouraging others to give feedback to me. Because if you're isolated, how do you know? How do you know? How do you know how you're doing? How do you know whether you're adding value or not, whether you're doing something well, whether you're helping somebody? How do you know these things? And being willing to learn from others and the way they do it, and adapting your behavior accordingly, adapting your worldview as a consequence. So finally, two things to finish today, and I'm looking for Diana at UN Women to tell me if I need to stop or not, and if I don't, then I'm just going to carry on just for a few more minutes. So I'm sorry just to be overrunning slightly, but I do want to get these last two pieces in. So we looked just a second ago at creating shared space through the exploration of other people's worlds and then be willing to adapt. Okay, so that's the first one. And then secondly, daring to share, reaching out to others, reaching out and sharing. And we do that through three processes: engaging, then exchanging, where dare to share really happens, and then exploring together in small groups, 3 or 4 maximum, so that we make progress. By the way, I should also share with you, I've done a lot of this over the last 9 or 10 months with my own collaborative partners. And one of the things I've found is that it happens best in twos. That's my experience. I'm not saying to you that that's what you should do, but be very conscious of the numbers of people that you are collaborating with at any one time. 2, 3, 4 maximum. But you're creating a shared space and consequently a shared understanding about the problem or the opportunity that you're working on. Shared space leads to shared understanding, and all the tools I'm sharing with you now, the behaviors and the mindsets, are what allow you both to create the shared space and then build a shared understanding. So 3 elements: engage, exchange, explore. Engagement, first of all, sincerity. I'm reaching out to you because actually I really do want to reach out to you. I want to know what you think and feel. I want to know what you're working on, what you're doing. Are we doing similar things? Secondly, adaptability, which I've already mentioned. So we're feeding out, we're coming out of the other people's worlds slide that was up on the screen a moment ago. We're adapting working methods, and others are adapting to you. We're creating a new shared space out of which we get shared understanding. We inquire of others' opinions and ideas. What do you think? What do you feel? What do you believe? I'm interested to know. Then we exchange, actively and openly sharing with others what you are working on. When I go into organizations, as I have done now for a number of years around collaborative working, it's amazing how many people identify to me the unwillingness that others have to share with them. There's a kind of prevailing view that knowledge is power. And if I share that knowledge with you, I'm reducing my power. And that's a very, very damaging thing. And it's particularly damaging for collaborative working. Actively sharing information and knowledge with others. So what are you working on, and what information and what knowledge do you have? And of course, there are wonderful online tools that allow us to do that, to put things out there. And then on this one, coming together regularly online to understand each other's work. One of the things that we're losing is, let's just meet up, let's hang out together online, let's have a chat. What are you working on? Oh, I'm working on this. I'm working. Oh, got you. And we come together. It doesn't have to be formalized and structured. We should have those online meetings. I'm seeing more and more organizations having sort of company drinks and things, online, and we chat and we talk around things rather than just talking about the delivery of the functional tasks in our work. And then finally, exploration. Offering help and support when it's needed, seeking out people whose knowledge and skills complement your own, and then finally proposing opportunities to develop joint projects. The offer of help and support, you give, you get back. Seeking out people whose knowledge and skills may be a little bit different to your own. What do I lack? What are my vulnerabilities? What don't I know? And working with those, being honest with yourself about what you don't have. And then as a consequence of that, we start developing and proposing new opportunities, as I say, to develop joint projects. Okay, I have got 1 or 2 more pieces to show, but we are out of time. So I'm going to thank you all very much for taking part today. I'm very happy if you find me on LinkedIn or in many, or whichever way you prefer, to carry on this dialogue. I've got a lot more information I can share with you on collaborative working. And if you'd like to experience some of that, then please do contact me. And at this stage now, I'm going to hand back to Diana and Anna and say thank you very much, all of you, for listening and being part of this webinar this afternoon, UK time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Douglas. We know it's not too much time until the end, but we kindly really like to ask our community to stay for 5 more minutes as we try to test our knowledge, and also as we try to wrap up. So many things. I knew about the presentation, I knew about the plan, but still was diligently taking some notes for myself, and proudly was like, yes, the Pomodoro technique I'm using for reading is a good one, you know, and yes, the reward I'm taking sometime during the lunchtime, not to eat, but to run, it's a good one. So, and I also took another column when I said, oh, here I'm lagging behind, so I probably need to increase some efforts here. So thank you so much, Douglas, for sharing with us these techniques. Here's our first learning questions, and we would like to know if you paid attention of how many minutes we need to resume a task. And I think that this is a very good information to know, to remember, so we can understand how to plan our time. And I think we all did great, because the majority of answer is correct. And we will now close and we'll share the results. So Douglas, be proud of us. We all learned the lesson.
I'm not going to ask you too much between 25 and 26 minutes.
So yes, and then the next question is, what is SPARC stands for? I don't know, it's a bit challenging, but let's see if we will do it. And as you know, these boosters are presented under the framework of We Empower G7 program. This is a program delivered by UN and ILO, and with financial support of European Union. And we always want to have our manager, Anna Fälth, to wrap it up the session and to share with us some news, what is upcoming in the next from the programmatic side, and maybe some reflection from her end. So Anna, over to you.
Thank you, Diana. I'm actually very curious to see how many people got this question right. So I'm waiting for the poll results to come in.
And I think we did great for this question as well. Yeah. We all know that self-direction, purpose, alignment, rewards, and challenge is the SPARC. So we all will SPARC. And it's so nice that maybe our community already noticed we started to use the Learn logo with our presentations. And there is a SPARC on the left side of the logo. So it's nice to remember this way: learn and have SPARC.
Yeah. So our new Learn logo that you will see much more of is actually inspired by this SPARC framework. So thank you very much. And Douglas, I've also taken note. You never can learn sufficient. I know we are working on this, but there's always a glimpse of elements to pick up and really take forward. We had, in the midst of our lockdown here in New York, actually once a week games that really made us come together, do something silly. We had silly questions and we had to kind of come up with the answers, and it really kind of brought the team together in the midst of the lockdown here in New York. So I totally agree. Finding that shared psychological space, finding the glue, you had said it in many different words. I think it boils down to the same, finding that glue for us to collaborate. And I think there were some other words that I really picked up was around empathy, to be able to put yourself in the shoes of somebody else and really understand their perspective. And the way you can do that is through the curiosity, being curious, being authentic in yourself, and really kind of show who you are and show interest in other people. That already brings you much closer to that glue. And I'm always talking in the team about curiosity is one of the strongest traits that somebody can have, because it leads to a lot of success. And not seeing feedback as something negative, but seeing as something constructive. Somebody that actually spend the time looking at your stuff means that they actually care about you. So it's not always presented maybe in the right way, the critique and then the feedback, but the intention is there to really improve what you're working on. So some of these are the elements that are also coming up, what Diana talked about earlier about in the boosters. Next week, we are very excited. We'll start putting the first booster online. So have a look. We'll send an email with a recording of this session, and also announce to you the space where all these materials will be living going forward. And finally, I would like to really thank, we are going over to the next event, but I'd like to thank Douglas so much for this session. We have a few sessions coming up, and we are working, as Diana was saying, with ILO and the European Union on different events. The next one, we're also collaborating with the Global Compact Network in Denmark. It's specifically targeting companies in the Nordic countries, but of course, anyone can benefit from the information that will be shared. It's about how the WEPs, the Women's Empowerment Principles, can benefit your company. It's on Wednesday, 11 November at 9 to 10:30. It's for an hour and a half. And the second event that we have upcoming is in the same week. It is Enhance Your Skills to Pivot Your Career. It's also one of these learning sessions. You'll recognize the Learn logo. Is the recognizer that this is for our personal development and for our personal learning. And it's on Thursday, 12 November at 7. Sorry, everyone. It's at 7 o'clock, but it's also to be able to cater for our audience in Europe and for other regions that are further away. So we are trying to keep it in the morning. This one is for the Eastern Standard Time, a little early, but we hope that you will all come. And for this one, we are also, in addition, collaborating with Women Will, which is the Grow with Google program, and that is focusing on women's leadership and women's empowerment in the workplace and the marketplace. So we really hope that you will join us for these events, and you will get notifications as usual by email, and you can also find information to register on our website. Finally, our traditional polls is to kind of get your sense of, after your learning, we already know a little bit because you answered the questions very well, but how do you feel confident about the topic that were presented today in terms of working collaboratively, particularly in remote? You feel informed, somewhat informed, well informed, and of course, there's always more to learn, as we know. Looking forward to see the polling results. Well informed, very good. Thank you so much. Do we have more questions, Diana?
Yes, we have one last question, and maybe very quickly, Douglas, here is a question. Have a question. When you want to seek others' perspective, you may raise question, and if the other person works with ego, you may not be able to have a positive collaboration. How do you approach such a person? I thought this is a very good question, and maybe we can take 30 seconds to respond. So when you want to seek others' perspective, you may raise question, and if the other person works with ego, you may not be able to have a positive collaboration. How do you approach such a person?
Yeah. All of us as human beings have I would say, I'm sorry to say this, but we all have a degree of selfishness in us. You know, many of us, of course, are very altruistic and want to, you know, and see the values of see the value of others in our own lives. But we also do have a selfish side, some more than others. And I think when we're looking at those who have very large egos, if we want to interact with someone, if we want to have a productive outcome with someone, we need to, I think it's a very nice principle. It's something I got off an expert called Zig Ziglar, what I call the WIIFM effect. So imagine there's this radio station called WIIFM, and the WIIFM stands for What's in It for Me. And you need to tune in to their WIIFM radio station. If you want to engage with someone, it might not be ego, it could be any reason, ego being one of them, but there could be a number of reasons. You need to tune into them and show them how something benefits them personally.
Thank you so much, Douglas. Anna, sorry for...
No. I think this was a very, very good question that I think we come across very, very often. And thanks, Douglas. And I recognize that this theory with tuning into the radio station FM is coming up in one of our upcoming boosters. So yes, you will have all the details once that goes live. We'll send you, as I mentioned earlier, a message towards next week to announce when the session is, when the platform is live, and when we have the first booster on confidence there, and then we'll continue to add as we develop them together with Douglas. So thanks so much, everyone, and thanks also to everyone that have participated. I'm very happy to see that there's such a high satisfaction rate. I'm also extremely happy with having learned so much today. And I look forward to continue this series of learning webinars that we're doing in collaboration through the We Empower program funded by the EU and in collaboration with ILO. So thanks so much, everyone. And thanks, Diana, for, as usual, moderating these sessions.
Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you so much, Douglas. Thank you so much to all of our community that joined. We know that some of you mentioned that, oh, I'm late with 10 minutes, with 7 minutes, but don't worry, we will share the recording. And please stay safe. It seems that we are going into the second phase or third phase of this pandemic, and we want all of you to stay healthy, safe, and to have a wonderful collaboration in your team. Thank you so much. Have a good day, or have a good afternoon or evening. Until next time.